because I think amongst the commercial banks, they're leading in renewable energy developments. Sterling Bank, they have e-mobility. They've done some work with Shell. I was reading about some work they've done with Ripple as well, which is also very interesting. And the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria, they've been an anchor in coordinating and mobilizing developers and other institutions to see that they get the attention in and the resources they need to scale renewable energy development in Nigeria. So without speaking too much and doing their jobs for them, I would like to introduce the panelists to everyone. So I'm going to start with the moderator. The moderator for tonight is Motorayo Akinfala, the Sustainable Development Professional and Project Manager, Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. Please, a round of applause for her. Then next, we'll have Mr. Kelly Aigbedion, the Head Business Development, Renewable Energy, Digital, Sterling Bank. Please, a round of applause for him as he comes to the podium. Thank you. We have Dr. Na Ajekai Ajay, the Senior Associate, Universal Energy Facility, Sustainable Energy for All. Please, a round of applause for her. And last and not the least, Dr. Abba Aliyu, the MD CEO, Rural Electrification Agency. A round of applause for him, please. So, dear Motorayo, over to you. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have all had a good day. I'd like to welcome you once again to the 109th edition of the Power Dialogue with the title, Leveraging Private Capital for Scalable Renewable Energy Access in Nigeria. And before we proceed, I'd like to please encourage all participants to put their phones on silent mode or vibration so that we don't create distractions in the course of the dialogue. So to begin with, it has been reported that in Nigeria, up to 84 million people still lack access to reliable electricity. And while the country is rich in renewable energy resources such as solar, hydro, wind, and biomass, our energy system is still very largely dependent on fossil fuels and an insufficient and unreliable centralized grid infrastructure. Now, Nigeria sets ambitious energy transition targets, aiming for net zero emissions by 2060 and also 30 gigawatts of electricity by 2030, with at least 30% of it coming from renewable sources. However, the scale of investment that is required to achieve these targets far exceeds the capabilities of public finance alone. And that's why we are here today. So when we hear the word capital, what comes to mind is finance, money. And I believe that just like myself, some of us in the room today do not have a background in finance. But then that's why we have seasoned experts on the panel today who will be doing justice to the discussion topic. We have Dr. Abba Aliyu from the government. We have Mr. Kelly Aigbedion from the banking sector, and we have Dr. Na to give us perspectives from development finance. So without much ado, let's get right into the discussion. We will take opening statements from our panelists, where we'll tackle our first objective simultaneously. And for the first objective, we're going to be exploring ways to mobilize private sector financing through innovative and de-risked investment structures. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Abba Aliyu.
All right, thank you very much. I think my opening statement will be a bit controversial, and in the sense that, like the moderator said, when it comes to capital, all what comes to our mind is availability of funds that we can access. To me, having worked in this ecosystem for quite some time, I believe that capital, unlocking private sector capital or any fund financing it's not just about availability of funds, but it's a bit much more than that. To me, it's making sure that who would access the funds has the requirement to access the funding. That is one. Two, even availability of technical skills and person or the company that will access the financing to be able to access the financing. Three, it's also the availability of a kind of corporate governance within an organization to be able to make those that will give the financing to be comfortable to be able to give the financing. So from my context, unlocking private capital is not just to think through, or FCMB or Sterling Bank has provided this funding. It's far beyond that. There are many nuances in terms of technical stakes, in terms of organizational structure, in terms of even having the skill to write the request for the financing. So in this discussion, my expectation is I would be able to provide this clarity with solid examples based on what we have seen to make sure that we deviate from not just thinking of having a full of funding, but ability to put certain things in order to be able to access the financing. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, sir, for that response and for the opening statement. So I'd like to ask you, sir, given that public finance alone cannot meet the scale of investment that is required for Nigeria's energy transition, what mechanisms has the REA used to reduce risks and to successfully attract private capital into off-grid and mini-grid projects? And also, can you please share examples of local financing that have successfully supported REA projects through cooperatives, microfinance, or community investment?
So the first example that we will give is one, how we were able to, for example, the local financing in Nigeria, how we were able to bridge the knowledge gap of the local financiers in Nigeria to be able to understand what the renewable energy space is all about. Prior to this current situation, when I was even the head of the project management system unit, apart from the Sterling Bank, there's no any local financing. Sterling Bank and FCMB, there was no any local financing that commit to financing the sector. But when we now analyze the situation, we started a deliberate means of engaging these local banks for them to be able to understand the sector. One of the things that we did was even to advise one of the banks to poach a skill or a staff from one of the renewable energy service companies to work in the bank so that he will be able to structure the financing to be able to meet the requirements of the sector. That is one. Two is also to the non-thing, it's the capital grant that we made available. We de-risked the sector, we made available the capital grant as a public sector financing to provide the private sector with the capital grant to be able to implement the project. Not only that, when I assumed duty as the head of project management unit, we now realize that due to fluctuation of the FX, even the capital grant that was being paid at that time in Naira, the fluctuation affects the projection, the financing projection of the private sector. And that created a serious risk. So we had to make a business case to the federal government to be able to be paying the grant in dollars. And that was approved, and we started that, which significantly reduced that risk. So that is from that end. But another also controversial point is that the private sector tends to, we need to move away with what is happening in the on-grid. The on-grid, all the private sector are saying that we don't want to invest in the on-grid. We need a partial risk guarantee. We need a put-call option agreement. We need termination protection in the event. So the private sector are not taking kind of any any risk. All they want is a ready-made project, and they put their money and they start getting their returns. And this is what we want to stop or to prevent in the off-grid. The private sector have the responsibility to take some risk. In as much as we would continue to direct the sector, the private sector have responsibility of also taking some portion of the risk. We have seen what, for example, the Standard Bank or Stanbic IBT and Standard Bank have done, in which they design a financial solution where any private sector that sign a grant agreement with REA will have a line of sight to tier one manufacturer of PV panels in China, which ordinarily the private sector would have to go through like at least 36 middlemen before they can access that kind of funding. So the private or the financiers or the private sector needs to be innovative, need to put in some level of innovation and solution for the sector to continue to work, not to continue to rely on the government, that the government needs to catalyze the private, directs the entire sector to zero before the funding keeps on coming. No, that shouldn't be. The private sector, the financiers, Sterling Bank, all other locals need to take some risks. The rest coast need to take some risks, and the government takes also risks. What makes a sector to work is allocation of the risk, and that allocation of risk is to allocate the risk to the party that best fit to take that risk, and that is what will make the sector to excel. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, sir, for that insightful explanation. So what I hear is that we need to continually de-risk the sector through innovative methods, and all stakeholders have to be willing to share the risk, take some of the risk, and be able to, do whatever it takes to make it work. Thank you very much. So I'll come to you, Dr. Na. The UEF has already signed agreements with 29 clean energy developers in Nigeria. From working with these developers, what have you learned about Nigeria's readiness to leverage private capital for renewable energy access?
Thank you so much. I don't know how one speaks after Dr. Aliyu, but here we are having the privilege. So I'd say two key insights have come out through our work as the UEF in Nigeria. We basically run standalone solar system for productive use program, and we've committed about $10 million to the program and currently have dispersed about 9.5 million. But importantly, the program has helped leverage about 16 million in private sector capital. So in terms of what we've learned, one, we've learned that there's a very capable and ambitious pool of clean energy developers that are ready to deliver at scale. So when we opened up our window for developers to apply, we had over 70 applications, about 30 qualified, and they submitted proposals seeking almost $50 million in grant financing to deploy over 25,000 connections. So what that told us is that just the sheer number of applicants, as well as the quality of applications we received, indicated to us that there is this pool of developers that are ready to essentially scale the sector. And they have the appetite and the technical ability to do so. So that was one really important insight coming from the implementation of our program. We have challenges which I'll address later, but I just wanted to start with, the highlights. Another important aspect that, really became clear to us in the implementation of the program is that the best way in which to kind of scale renewable energy, especially off-grid, is ensuring that our solar systems are linked to productive use. So these deployments that are supported by income generating activities right from the start. So, putting up our solar systems for tailors, for people who are running milling processes, just essentially this productive use element anchors the sector and makes it a more financially viable sector, looking specifically at the standalone. So those are the two key insights that really jumped out to us. And then in terms of our challenges, and this speaks directly to the financing, as much as there's a big pool of developers who are ready to take this on and who do have the experience, we found that a lot of developers essentially face delays in, securing their financing. Some was due to, the due diligence processes that I'm hoping that my colleague will speak to, but it was around streamlining the finance processes with the debt and equity investors. So as much as there were these ambitions and there were these huge projects that, the developers wanted to bring on board, there was kind of this gap in between what they planned and what they could actually secure financing for quickly enough, because we were essentially, the UEF was essentially put in place to scale renewable energy projects quite quickly. And so, the timeline within which we were moving, a lot of the renewable energy developers that we approved under our program weren't able to essentially secure the financing that they had hoped to secure due to just essentially lengthy processes. And whilst the banks are opening up to financing and providing debt finance to developers, it took a lot of sensitization to really understand how these models work and how the programs work. So those were kind of the key insights, good and bad, that, really stood out to us. So, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Na. Hinging on what you have just said, I'd like to come to Mr. Kelly to scale the sector. So from the banking and banks, align the lending frameworks to fit the long-term nature and the cash flow patterns of renewable energy projects.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. So I'm excited that Sterling Bank has positioned itself as the pace setter in this industry, trying to finance renewable energy projects and also do some innovative works around the industry. So we didn't just get here overnight, right? It's actually a lot of work, a lot of learnings. There were some projects that we failed, but we took those learnings from those failed projects and we improved on it. Regarding aligning lending framework, the first thing any financial institution who wants to actually play in this space needs to understand is that your conventional loan tenor is not going to apply here, right? Renewable energy projects are unique. So you don't expect financing a project, you want to provide a 2-year tenor or a 4-year tenor. So extended loan tenor should be something any local financial institution should look at. Secondly, some of the findings we've also got is that a lot of times project developers come to you for funding or come for financing. At the end of the day, there is actually misappropriation of funds. So another new strategy in place is to implement phased disbursement. So which means on the long line of a project, you have milestones. At each milestone you disburse, at each milestone you disburse. In that case, you'll be able to monitor the effective appropriation of the funds that you're providing. And Dr. actually made an important point while he was making his opening remark. If you want to play in this space, you don't need to be a corporate banker. You need someone who has an extensive knowledge and experience in the renewable energy space to be in your team. I, for one, have never been a banker in my entire life. I have been in the renewable energy space for almost 10 years before I was drafted into the financial institution. So my little knowledge while in that renewable energy space is what I bring to the table when we're having conversations around any project we want to finance. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Mr. Kelly, for that. Thank you for those insights. So from this objective now, what I've heard clearly is that if we continually make efforts to de-risk investments and with the right financing tools, private capital will flow more strongly into Nigeria's renewable energy sector. Now let's discuss how to strengthen the policy, the regulatory and institutional environment so as to attract and to retain investment. I'll come back to you, Dr. Abba. Can you please tell us how can coordination between REA, NEC, and state-level agencies be improved to speed up project approvals and to reduce transaction costs for investors?
Before answering that, Kelly, maybe you are the person that we recommended for the bank to uptake from the Renewable Energy Service Company. But coming back to your question, we need to go back to the Electrification Act of 2023. Clearly, I can't remember the section, but clearly, if you read the section, the act mandated Rural Electrification Agency to be the coordinator of the entire renewable energy deployment in the country. 2, it mandated the Rural Electrification Agency to develop the National Electrification Strategy and Implementation Plan. 3, it mandated the Rural Electrification Agency to coordinate with the subnational, with the state in the implementation of renewable energy deployment. In fact, it even went further to say that the Rural Electrification Agency should also support, coordinate with the subnational to establish local government electrification board at the local level. This is the huge mandate that the Act has put in place. Now, the people that crafted the Act, having put all this, one, you know, it's as much as possible you are decentralizing the implementation of renewable energy in the country, but you are bringing too many stakeholders. I'm bringing too many stakeholders into the implementation. You know, the famous English and too many people, what? Spoil the broth, right? So that it's, so those crafting, they saw also that, and that was why they now asked us to develop the National Electrification Strategy and Implementation Plan. So that plan is to now serve as the main coordinating framework for all the stakeholders, not only the subnational, but the private sector, what's the name of the electricity hub, right? Even you, whoever wants to operate within the sector, it's to work within that framework. So the first thing we did was to develop the National Electrification Strategy and Strategy and Implementation Plan, which I'm happy to say that most likely by tomorrow or next tomorrow, the National Economic Council will approve that. This is one of the major changes, major achievement in the sector. The plan bring about the entire different electrification plants that have been operating in silos into one. The plan mapped the entire country as regards to the potential of renewable energy deployment. The plan defined the least cost of electrification in each community, in each local government, in each state. The plan did a state-by-state readiness assessment. And based on those all outcomes, we now started the implementation of the state-by-state roundtable. In fact, this morning we just finished with the ABIA. A number of key people, I've seen the guy with the software who attended the ABIA state roundtable. And today we did the 15th state roundtable. And this is the way to answer your question, bringing all the stakeholders, the NAC, the subnational, the financiers. Based on the plan, the financiers can do short-term, medium-term, and long-term projection. Because if I'm a financier, I need to see a project pipeline to be able to commit my funding. The plan provides you with that. If I'm a political holder, a governor, if I want to do state development plan and I want to commit resources for electrification in the state, the plan provides me with where I can put least amount and get maximum outcome, rather than just going to Kelly's state and put more of the resources. And the plan also for the National Assembly, also, if they want to appropriate money, the plan provides them with where they can best appropriate it and get also maximum impact. So this is what we are using to create that coordination and to ensure that we have all people moving towards the same direction. And in the last addition is to also say that the plan, apart from the mapping, apart from the state readiness, apart from the least cost provision, it also gives us what we are going to do at the second level of the NESIP implementation, what we call SWAP, sector-wide approach, which is what the only sector that has done it, the Ministry of Health, to now bring all these stakeholders, the subnational, the ministry, the REAs, the finances into one, to now sign what we call one plan, one report, one funding, and one conversation, to make sure that from now to the next 10 years, what we are all doing, committing, it's within that framework to make sure that we address this access gap. And I would really want to challenge all of us that once we launch this plan, please own it and have it. It gives you all what you required in terms of coordination, and it also gives you a sense of direction, be it your RESCO, be it your financiers, be it your government, be it your National Assembly, be it even if you are the electricity hub in Nigeria. Thank you.
Wonderful. Can we please give a round of applause to the REA? You're really doing a lot of great work. Thank you very much, sir, for that insightful response. So from the development finance perspective, Dr. Na, could you please tell us what institutional mechanisms are most critical for building investor confidence in your experience?
All right, thank you so much. So I'll start again by providing some context on the UEF. Essentially, we're a results-based financing mechanism, which means that we only pay out based on predetermined results, which means that developers actually need to go out into the market and secure their debt and equity financing first. And then once these predetermined milestones have been met, then we come in and we provide the financing in increments, well, grant financing in increments and at a certain percentage of the total project costs. And so this means that the environment where we need to create, well, essentially developers need an environment where investors feel comfortable in investing, because they first initially need to get that upfront capital before they're able to unlock our grant financing. And what we've seen come out of that for, our developers going out to the market is one of the key things has been, the credibility of the off-takers. And this is also linked to, the standardization of contracts and documentation of that sort. So how they're linked is that, one, financiers want to know that their money would be paid back. So if they're providing debt for a project, they need to know that it's coming back, and they need to know who is the off-taker of this electricity. And even in like the smaller scale standalone, solar, we still need to pay the money back essentially. So having productive use customers, as anchor loads, such as health facilities, such as, the tailors that I spoke about earlier, market clusters, and just various SMEs, knowing that there will be that flow of finance back, to buy the electricity and then to be able to pay that back, that financing is very key. So, the credibility and reliability of the off-takers, even in standalone systems, is very important. And then again, linking that to what I said around the standardized contracts and documentation, they're linked because, again, investors want to see that you have secured arrangements and agreements with people to offtake. So we need to know what are the customer agreements. This provides clarity in terms of how much the electricity is going for and how the repayment's going to happen. So those two are quite interlinked. And then next, we've seen from an institutional perspective, what's very important and what can't be, overstated is really uncertainty in terms of the licensing procedures. Forex, for example, has impacted quite heavily, import duties. Just there needs to be that certainty within the sector, knowing that, for example, if developers import, certain components of their project, they need to know what those import duties will look like, what that import process looks like, clearing it from the port, how quickly will that be done? So it's those kind of institutional aspects that we've seen have really impacted, investors' confidence to put money towards the sector. So streamlining those aspects is very important. And from the UEF perspective, specifically, providing this results-based financing, this grant financing, it's been proving to be quite a powerful tool for investors in that they're seeing that there is this grant financing to essentially offset a high amount of that cost. So, also by providing this disbursement of milestone payments, it also enables developers access to capital earlier on, as opposed to, at the end, which has been previously done. So this earlier access to capital really eases this pre-financing burden that a lot of developers undertake. So it builds trust and it really builds kind of confidence in the sector, knowing that there is this DFI that's providing this grant financing to offset initial costs or offset, the CapEx. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Na. So I'll come to you, Mr. Kelly. I know this question is a little bit similar to the previous one, but I'd like to know from a financier's perspective now, what specific instruments are most critical to enhancing the bankability of renewable energy projects? Given that would give investors the confidence to commit long-term capital.
Okay. For any local financial institution today, the first thing they will look out for in any project is credit guarantee. So if I'm investing in this project and eventually it doesn't go the way we expect it, is that institution going to lose their money? So once you can provide a clear credit guarantee to that financial institution, probably you must have secured that guarantee from a third party. Yes, they are willing to go in and invest. Secondly, for large-scale projects, the moment there is an element of blended financing, you see that a lot of financial institutions want to jump in because in a way that helps them de-risk, right? So they are not just taking the entire risk alone. There is some pool of funds somewhere coming from maybe the development institutions or development banks. And lastly, for any project a financial institution wants to finance, they will ask you detailed questions. They will ask you things that even you coming to them did not put in your feasibility studies. The reason is that they want to be sure that the revenue stream coming from that project is enough to repay whatever they are giving you. So, which means your power purchase agreement must be bankable. What's the creditworthiness of your off-taker? What is the tariff plan? Is it a long-term project? Is it a mid-term project? Is it a short-term project? So these are the things that financial institutions will always use as instrument before they invest in any projects.
Thank you very much for that response. So it's very clear that credit guarantees, blended financing, and the creditworthiness of off-takers are key factors to be considered when you want to talk about the bankability of renewable energy projects. Moving to the third objective now, we want to discuss how we can drive scalable, decentralized energy solutions for inclusive access in underserved areas to secure local financing. I'll come back to you, Dr. Abba Aliyu. Can you tell us what lessons Nigeria can learn from other African countries that have effectively combined development finance, climate policy, and private investment to expand renewable energy access?
In terms of lessons, and I would like to answer this with some sense of modesty. I think Nigeria has been a pioneer in setting the pace when it comes to renewable energy in the continent. Even countries like Kenya that were before now ahead of us, we are seeing that most of the concept, most of the framework now that we are putting in place, it's much more than their own existing framework, to the extent that based on the number of demands that we tend to get from other African countries, more especially those without the access, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Gambia, Burkina Faso, we started based on the demand that they want to come to REA to learn how we are designing our project, implementing our project. We started to feel that we started to sense there's economic opportunity in this area. You know, when you put an economist as the head of REA, money would, where whatever happens, he sees Naira and Kobo there. So we started to see the potential of Naira and Kobo in that, and we started now studying for the establishment of African Renewable Energy or African Learning Academy here in Nigeria, so that all those demands, rather than pipeline, and we give them the learning point and make some Naira and Kobo and continue to deploy mini grid. But having said that, I would also be modest enough to say that one key thing that we have learned from other African country is the capacity level of their mini grid regulation. In Nigeria, our mini grid regulation has a cap of 1 megawatt, and you have 86 million people to electrify. Go to Liberia and see that their mini grid regulation, it has a cap of 50 megawatts, and they have less than 6 million people to electrify. Go to Burkina Faso, go to South Africa, 100 megawatts. So this is something that we have learned, and we continue to engage with the regulator. When we first wrote to the regulator that we need to revise that cap on the mini grid regulation, they first of all, they said no automatically. We exchange, it's on record, we exchange 8 letters between REA and the regulator. They give an excuse of why they should not raise the cap. We give an excuse reason why they should raise the cap. To the extent now that they have started developing interconnected mini grid regulation, which would definitely raise the cap from 1 megawatt to a much larger megawatt. I think this is the point where I deserve a round of applause. This is for you guys, for the private sector guys, you that are really wants to deploy large scale, as you said, distributed access. So we are waiting to see. They will soon call for stakeholder engagement. You go give your contribution, demand for nothing less than 50 megawatts, but we can settle with even 20. But make sure that you give reason why. And this is something that automatically we learn it from other African countries for us to scale, to do much project and really be more daring and to be able to address the access gap. So this is my reflection point.
Thank you, sir. That's very interesting. Please, a round of applause once again for the MD of REA. Thank you so much, sir. So we've learned that the learnings is both ways. While Nigeria is pioneering in some areas, we also have 1 or 2 things to learn from other African countries, particularly regarding the capacity level of their mini grid regulations. So I'll come to you, Dr. Na. Based on your experience with Nigerian developers, what ownership models best ensure project sustainability while delivering attractive returns for private capital?
Thank you so much. Again, bringing it back to our SSPU program, basically 2 key things really stood out for us. So first, I spoke about it a bit earlier, but one, the model where we use productive use clusters to essentially anchor local enterprises. As I said, that is because we need to ensure that these projects are sustainable as standalone projects. So we found that projects are essentially durable when the systems are fitted within real income generating activities. Mentioning the cold stores, the welding. We have people who have standalone systems around their irrigation systems, market hubs. We've deployed a lot of standalone systems in various markets across Nigeria. So essentially having this, anchored within the community, within these productive use clusters has been the most important learning for us. I guess also because we're specifically focused as a productive use program. So, co-designing these deployment plans as well with associations, cooperatives. I was speaking to somebody in the audience recently, and they spoke about a kind of study that they're doing with the Cuba Association of Tailors to see how to make, renewable energy and, standalone systems more viable and effective through working with associations to ensure, the bankability of the projects. I think the second big learning for us in terms of the community engagement and the ownership aspect was that we needed a strong local presence for, after sales and accountability. So essentially having agents who are from the communities that are trained, that are incentivized, and that are able to deal with first line challenges that arise with any of the, solar systems that are deployed. So, having these people who are essentially the middleman in between the developers who might not always be on ground and, the community who's, using the standalone system day to day, having those people who understand the systems, who can do, first level sort of repairs, who can engage with the community around training, explaining how the systems work, etc. That really having that local agent build a sense of ownership and really, helps to essentially deal with smaller problems before they become big and before the developer gets to know of it. Having that local agent on ground for the after sales support for, the end user for these projects has been quite key. So I think those have been the two sort of community engagement / ownership models that we've seen to be quite important in our standalone solar for productive use system in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your experience with us. Mr. Kelly, I'd like to ask you, Sterling Bank has supported SMEs, right? And rural businesses. What financing models can help scale decentralized energy access in underserved areas while ensuring commercial viability?
Interesting. So we decided to pay more attention to businesses and SMEs because no nation survives without the SME space not fully functional. And there was a report, was it last year, prepared by SE for All, targeting Lagos, the number of generators and the amount of money spent on fueling those generators just for business owners. So that actually gave us some level of intentionality to say, you know what, let's provide financing for solutions for SMEs and business owners so that they can cut down their OPEX on fueling their generators. And we've recorded tremendous progress in that regard. One of the key models that we've used and which is working is the lease to own approach, right? So you make just an equity contribution of, let's say, 10% of the total cost of the solution, and you structure a repayment over a period of 12 months up to 48 months. So once you are done with your repayments, the solution and the asset becomes your property. So in that same way, you look at what is their normal cash flow like on a weekly basis. So what do they spend on generator, on fueling, if they were supposed to use generators, versus what you are charging them on a monthly basis based on the tenure you have structured. And at the end of the day, we've discovered that renewable energy is actually cheaper in the long run. So that's one of the models we've used, lease to own approach. And we are also looking in the area of providing energy as a service for clusters of businesses where they have limitations around standalone systems. So probably have a kind of a microgrid, then you charge them based on usage. So that's also something we are looking at.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. So we've heard that Sterling Bank has used lease to own model and energy as a service as one of their models for helping to scale decentralized renewable energy access in underserved areas. To address the fourth objective now, we're going to be looking at how to align development projects and climate policy instruments to attract private capital. Dr. Abba, can you please tell us, how does REA ensure alignment between private sector projects, indices, and broader climate goals?
Tough question. To be honest, I think one, it's through our technical standard and our due diligence. If we are going to finance or provide a capital grant to any private sector, we have due diligence that must be done. And we have our technical standard. The essence of that, one of it is to make sure that there's an alignment. In fact, what we are working on, we got the approval for the establishment of Renewable Asset Management Company, which part of its mandate is to make sure that it monetize this carbon credit for all the projects, even if that project is on PPP, and the return be shared between the different parties. So we ensure that alignment, one, through the due diligence, through our technical standard, to make sure that the project meets all the requirements needed to be able to harness the carbon credit, to make sure that it's aligned with the country's NDCs. So as simple as that, this is, to me, what we put in place to ensure that alignment.
Thank you, sir. Due diligence and technical standards. Dr. Na, how can Nigeria position itself to capture more international climate finance while ensuring these flows complement rather than crowd out private commercial investment?
Thank you. So as Dr. Liu mentioned, I think Nigeria has been very pioneering in terms of renewable energy deployment, and is basically the leader on the continent around this. So I think firstly, Nigeria needs to, showcase that it has this proven track record of developer capacity and delivery. So it's not that just there's a demand that exists, but there's also developers in place who've shown that they can deliver at scale. As I mentioned, when we launched our call for proposals, we had over 70 applications, 30 qualified. There was projects in the pipeline that had been shown to us that was worth, looking for approximately $50 million in grant financing. And to date, we've achieved quite, notable results. Essentially, I think that this progress and this leadership within the sector needs to just be communicated a lot more to DFI, so that they are aware of this, pioneering activity, and also knowing that it's not just about those developers here, but those developers with proven results, with a proven track record. And that would also help crowd and finance. I think the second aspect, which speaks to how do we make sure that they're complementary, is that, and I think each of the panelists have spoken to it, is ensuring that we use blended finance models, so that de-risk the private capital investment rather than replacing it. So as the UEF, we provide grant financing that helps de-risk then the investments. And as Mr. Kelly mentioned, that's one thing that they look for right off the bat, to see is anybody else investing in this that will de-risk this project for us. So essentially structuring programs and projects in a way that, and providing essentially financing vehicles that de-risk and complements the private finance that comes into the sector. It doesn't need to replace it at all. And then lastly, again, in terms of attracting, it speaks to the first point around communication, but, having these transparent frameworks in place that essentially communicate this very important data. So platforms such as Odyssey that allow us to capture and provide credible and viable evidence of implementation. Financiers, DFIs also have, their board, their stakeholders, etc., to report to. And so having these clear data points that, one, they can report to, and two, they can also learn from, is very important. So I think those are some of the things that we've noted in our implementation of our program that would help crowd in climate finance and, not replace private sector finance.
Wow, excellent. Thank you very much for that response. Mr. Kelly, finally, before we throw the discussion open for contributions and questions, can you please tell us, how can Nigeria's development projects be designed to attract more local private capital, development projects now?
Projects. Okay, thank you for that question. So first thing I will advise, irrespective of the size of your project, especially when you know you are going to be seeking financing from partners or financial institutions, try and see how you can break them into smaller, manageable investments so that you can attract more financing partners. Because the bigger the project, the bigger the risk. Financial institutions, like Dr. already alluded, are scared of risk. So if your project is about $50 million, yes, there are some institutions that want to jump at it. But for a typical financial institution in Nigeria today, they will prefer to have a kind of a blended financing that would de-risk them. Okay? Either that approach, or you try and see how you break those projects into smaller mini projects within the main project, whereby you can attract Sterling Bank, Stanbic IBTC, Wema Bank, or even DBN or BOI, right? So that you know that you have multiple financing partners in that project. In that way, they are limiting their risk. That is one. Secondly, I still keep saying this. As a project developer or someone who is into project development, please do your due diligence. Just ensure you carry out the necessary feasibility studies. You know you are coming to a financial institution for financing. Definitely there will be questions. They will want to see, they will want to understand that there is a level of certainty that these monies are coming back. So those are the two things I think anybody that wants to go into project development should look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I keep hearing blended finance, blended finance, blended finance. So it means that climate finance should complement private capital so that Nigeria can meet its energy access goals as well as its climate goals. Thank you very much for those responses. Now we're going to open the floor to the audience, both here in the room and online. If you have any questions or contributions, could you please signify by raising your hand? And when you're given the mic, please introduce yourself and your organization and try as much as possible to direct your question to a specific panelist. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Taufik Yaya. I'm a private legal practitioner. First, it's a comment, then secondly, I'll pose questions. One question, but it goes to both of Dr. Abba and Mr. Kelly. You know, Dr. Abba, on a lighter note, I belong to the class of students who really doesn't like your agency. Yeah, because before now, I felt why REA in present-day Nigeria. You know why? Two reasons recently. Anytime I'm coming back from work, I drive into my estate here in Abuja. I see the solar light sponsored by REA. I'm like, this is not a rural area, for crying out loud. Then another time I was at one of these, a place I volunteer. So we're looking at having electrifying a particular religious facility, a mosque actually in the city here. And somebody said, there's no need to contribute money for all these things. And we can send the letter to REA. There's a way they do it. They bring it for us. I'm like, is that what REA do in present in Nigeria? But then I watched your interview on Channels Television a few days back, where you were highlighting some of your mini grid projects in some universities. I'm like, oh, okay, more like it. Maybe it's time the agency gets a new name. Perhaps my hatred is because I know what the people in the rural area, I'm from a village, what we go through to get light. And then I see REA sponsored solar street light on the street of an estate we pay heavily to service. So, but then you made a comment on increasing the threshold for mini grid projects. I know it's 100 kilowatts per hour distribution, 1 megawatt generation. But then recently, we were preparing an exception legal advice for a client who wants to venture into mini grid. And then we're looking at the regulations, precisely the mini grid regulations 2023. And you discover that the law treats mini grid operators as inferior stakeholders compared to the legacy discourse, in the sense that for you to apply for a mini grid license now, you need a sort of, let me say, no objection, consent or consent from the disco applicable to the relevant area, right? Before you can get it. And it doesn't even have to do with the current coverage of the disco. It looks at the expansion plan of the disco. So I wouldn't know what, in your discussion in expanding the megawatt capacity, because if you expand the megawatt capacity, well, logically, you need broader area, wider scope. For example, if you need 50 megawatts now, you need wider coverage to recoup your investment as a private investor in that. So what is your agency and the regulator doing to address that particular aspect? And I'm anti-disco too. I don't like the discos. I don't like them. I don't like the discos. And then Mr. Kelly, isn't that something financial players to also look at, because you don't want to fund the projects and disco comes another time to start degenerating into conflict. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay. A very good question. I share your sentiment when it comes to the image of electrification agency before now, and you're absolutely right. A number of things project, you do question why such projects are there, but you need to understand that REA has 3 or 4 different sources of funding, and each funding define how REA operates. And a number of them, you have no control over it. So the Appropriation Act is one source of funding, and it comes prescribed with how REA should use that funding. And if that appropriation comes in with me to even power where there is no people, it's a law. I have to go with that. So there's that challenge. The second one is the DFI, which has a developed concept note and program implementation, which it's targeted. The third source of funding is the funding that comes from the market based on the Electrification Act, what goes into the Rural Electrification Fund based on levies or fines imposed by the regulator. So that money comes to REA, and we have a plan in terms of how we implement it. The third one is the grants that we get, which also come from DFIs and has specific also design on how we will implement it. Be it as it may, REA has drastically changed. And I'm saying this not because I'm now hating the agency. You can't come and look at the kind of project that REA does and question the rationale. Everything is data-driven, even if it is National Assembly. For example, this last year when we were doing the budget defense, we went with the mapping of the entire country and provided it to the legislators to help them if they are situating what we call constituency projects. Let it be data-driven. That is to, in our own quest to reverse just citing projects for political reason. Then to answer your second question, what you have forgotten is that there are people that are on band C, D, and E. These are people that have existing infrastructure. They do not have reliability. And this is a huge market. Over 40 million people fall within that market. And those are the people that we are now targeting. And that is why what I mentioned, the regulation is not going to be a mini grid regulation, is going to be interconnected mini grid regulation. So carving a regulation to do that aspect of it. I'm currently developing 42 interconnected mini grids. When we ask the distribution companies to give us sites, initially distribution company don't want REA to come anywhere around their franchise areas. But based on number of things that has happened or changed, now when we ask for the sites for us to build mini grids, just guess how many sites distribution companies gave us? 600 sites. So we just picked 42 sites out of this 600 to build the interconnected mini grid. And based on this, we had to get a derogation approval from the regulator, because all the 42, there's no one that is less than 2 megawatts. We have even 12 megawatts that we are deploying. So those areas are there rampant that require what we need to do to enhance reliability. And those are the areas that we are targeting. And that is why we want the cap to be increased. Thank you.
To add to Doctor's take, so the regulatory policies does not just affect project developers alone. So let me use our building for an example. Sterling Towers today is wrapped up with BIPV, right? But because of regulation, we didn't get up to what we're supposed to actually get. We needed to install just 0.99 megawatts because we wanted to stay within that 1 megawatt threshold. So for project developers, you are right. Not having clear-cut regulatory policies on what you can generate or what you can actually sell out will definitely hinder a financial institution in providing whatever grant or whatever financing element or instrument. Because you want to look at it, have you gotten all the necessary approvals? What is the size of this project? Hope I'm not going to get into issues with regulatory bodies in the future. So these are things we actually look out for.
I hope that answers your question. Okay, we have a hand at the back. Yes.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Alisa Didayo. I work as an energy consultant and research analyst. So my question is to Dr. Abba. Considering that climate finance, some of the climate finance coming into the country are mostly concessional loans, and which is increasing our debt portfolio as a country. So how do we bridge this gap between debt servicing and climate finance? Thank you.
A very, very, very good question. I like this. And this is a national discourse. This is something that as a country, we need to start discussing it. Continuously, all the funding, all the financing, the 750 million, the expected 190 million from JICA, 750 from World Bank, 700 from AFDB, potentially, all this funding are loans, which on the back of the sovereign balance sheet. Recently, if you are following what REA is doing, you will see that last 4 weeks, we signed an agreement with the Budget Office, InfraCorp, and Ministry of Finance Incorporation. The essence of creating the Renewable Asset Management Company is to mitigate that risk. We know that we are overstretching the leverage, the borrowing ratio of the country, and continue to rely on the country's balance sheet. What we are now saying is innovative way. The main asset that we have deployed under the EPC level, for example, the 15 that we deployed at the university, this is a total of close to, give or take, 300, 400, or $500 million. This asset, in as much as they're generating the electricity and serving the community, but we are not optimally utilizing the asset. We created the RAMCO, used novation agreement to transfer this asset from REA to the balance sheet of the RAMCO. Then the RAMCO will leverage on that balance sheet to raise private sector funding. So this is raising funding without recourse to the country's balance sheet and continue to use that funding to deploy more renewable infrastructure. So we are already thinking in that regard and started to mitigate that. When I had a discussion with, just by the way, yesterday, somebody who was working with the REA equivalent in Ghana, when he heard about the RAMCO discussion, he was telling my staff that what he now been forced to start following REA, because in his own words, every other week, REA comes up with a new innovative model that does not only solve the problem of the Nigerian ecosystem, but the African continent as a whole. This is what we are doing. And that is why we started thinking in that to address the risk. But thank you for that question.
Okay, there's another hand at the back.
All right, thank you. My name is Engineer Akachuku Uche, and I once worked with the National Grid with TCN. I was a custodian of the grid. First of all, I have a comment, and I must say, high praise to you, sir, Dr. Abba, with the work you do. If you have been on the back end to see how the National Grid operates, you would know that the interconnected mini grid, it's a very big deal, and that would be a lot of positive effect on the people. My question goes, if I was to think ambitiously into the future, from the Electrification Act of 2023, REA is the sole, shall I say, watchman for renewable deployment in Nigeria. Are there any plans to deploy directly to the grid? Because with what we currently have now, if we have renewable plants, 100 megawatts, 1,000 megawatts, and not just limited to solar, even bringing in systems like the wind energy, we've seen it in first world countries, where in Germany, the wind capacity is even much more than they need. And we have wind blowing everywhere here in the country. Are there plans to integrate the renewable systems with our on-grid solutions? And if yes, how? I would like to hear how you think it will play out, since you guys are the ones in charge, your organization is in charge of deploying for Nigeria. Who would then be the person on the steering, if for a better way to put it? Thank you.
Okay, sorry, sir,
yeah.
before you go ahead, I think we should take all the questions together. And I'd like to implore us to please keep your questions very brief and straight to the point because of time. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Musa Idris, and I must appreciate the. Okay, thank you. I want to appreciate the speakers. Like I enjoyed this program very much, and my question is I'm addressing my question to Dr. Appa. I work with Wesa Solar. I'm an O&M engineer with Wesa Solar. Before joining Wesa Solar, I was a project engineer with a linked group of companies, and most of the projects I have led were mostly REA projects. So it means I have traveled to many places across Nigeria, to rural communities. I have seen opportunities there, like economic opportunities there, and then I've also identified some of their challenges. So my question now is there, considering the fact that these rural communities, most of the investment now in clean energy for, let me say, the targets are mostly for businesses. That's what I've observed. They are mostly for businesses and SMEs, MSMEs. So are there plans to make this energy accessible, or how, if they are known, how can this be accessible, in the rural communities in Nigeria? Because, if you I have first my experience there is that there are a lot of opportunities, there, and the time is short. I can't, I want to make my question very brief. There are a lot of opportunities that I believe, bringing this, providing access, making access to clean energy there will develop the economic sector in that area. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Basayo Mofe, and I'm sorry, my question is to everyone. So we're talking about local financing, and nobody mentioned taking advantage of carbon markets. And I think it's very sad that we do not take advantage of the potential that the role Nigeria has played in carbon market development. So my question is, what role can carbon markets play in scaling renewable energy access, and how can instruments like this attract decisions for like IOC, instead of them leaving, how can they reinvest in a new sector in Nigeria? And partner nations seeking to, you know, offset their carbon, how can they look into Nigeria to make Nigeria like an investable place, especially to offset their own carbon? Because taking advantage of renewable energy systems and the energy access gap, I think it's a very big opportunity in decarbonizing Nigeria, number one, improving electricity access, number two, and also making money, because I feel like the carbon markets can actually replace our dependency on loans and aid. Thank you.
Okay, any other question?
All right, thank you very much. I want to appreciate each and everyone, especially the panelists and Dr. Abba for a great job at REA. My name is Robert Emmanuel, and I'm the president of the Society for Energy Efficiency and Conservation in Nigeria. Now, my question is directed to Dr. Abba. What policy reforms are the REA considering when it comes to mobilizing capital for renewables, especially supporting energy efficiency in some of these old buildings, government buildings and the likes? Because from experience, we realize that sometimes government invests heavily in energy efficient, or rather in renewable energy, providing solar and the likes, but energy is being wasted, especially in old buildings. And they have equipment, most of these appliances they use are old-fashioned, and they consume a whole lot of energy. So at the end of the day, you are providing solar power, and the solar power is still being wasted. So what is the government, what is REA doing to bring out reforms to ensure that whenever renewable energy projects are being carried out, energy efficiency is also taken into consideration? That's one. Then my second question is this. We talked about de-risking. What about what is the role? What are you bringing? Are you mixing mechanisms like insurance in de-risking renewable energy projects? Thank you.
Okay, sorry. We'll take 2 more questions from the audience in-house and 1 question online, and we'll wrap it up because of time. Thank you very much.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, my name is Dr. Alexander Akolo. I work with GIZ, and one of the things I'm responsible for doing is helping set up the state electricity market. And I've had a lot of interaction with the state regulators, State Electricity Regulatory Commission, as well as the electrification agencies. So obviously, my question is directed to my boss, Dr. Abba Aliu. I wanted to pity you because everybody seems to be asking only you questions, but obviously I just have to ask you. For most of my interactions with the state, and I see what you're doing with the state, fantastic, sir. It's obvious that the states, most of them, I don't want to use the word lack, but there's a serious debt of capacity, especially for the regulatory, no, not the regulatory, the electrification agencies. How is REA enrolling these people? How is REA going to help the states? Because now we're talking about mobilizing private sector financing. And if these guys don't have capacity, I think that will be very extremely difficult. That's one. On the second hand, I've read most of the laws, electricity laws, and most of the states have also set up a rural electrification fund. For most of the states that NEC has granted regulatory oversight to, I can just assume that these funds are zero right now. There's no funding in it. So my question to you again, sir, is how can the states mobilize private funding, either from donor parties such as GIZ and others, into this rural electrification fund? Thank you.
There's a hand here, please.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very
And
much.
there's one here.
My name is Idris Kuforiji from the Nigerian Governors Forum. I'm the senior energy economist. So it just happens to be that Alex has asked one of the questions I want to ask my boss. Then my second question will be going to Mr. Kelly. So I understand that you provide financing within that renewable energy for the MSME. So I also know that because I've actually been in the project development space before now. So I know there are quite a lot of challenges that have been faced around the viability of most of the projects. Sometimes it could even be the project team capacity as well. So around the MSME, so what are the major challenges that you've been facing around that side? And the second question would be that there seems to be quite same type of financing that most of different organizations, just like Sterling Bank also provide. So is there kind of innovative approach that your company is looking at just to be sure that you make financing easy in that space? All right, thank you very much.
Two more questions, one here and one here. Thank you. I didn't see that hand before. Sorry. Okay, just take it.
Thank you. My name is Al-Hassan Hassan. I'm presently conducting a research regarding rural electrification, particularly in the areas of implementing the policy, which I think is the primary responsibility of the REA, implementing the rural electrification policy. I've gone to many rural remote areas and I collected data. I really appreciate the work of the REA in terms of providing energy access. But what the data is showing me is that there is gap when it comes to the utilization, the utilization pattern of the provided electricity. More than 90% of the adapters are residential. And those residential loads are very, very meager, very meager. So, and there is a lot of demand when it comes to the productive use of this energy, especially in the areas of agriculture and small businesses. So what I've seen is that REA have stepped into the areas of PUE. So, but the agri segment of the PUE, I think need to be step in. So the sustainability of the mini grids, on the other hand, is another area that I have started seeing some red lights. Because in some, for instance, there is a village I visited, I don't want to mention the place, in Kaduna. By 4 p.m., the grid will start to fluctuate. And there is a lady who has a provision store. She has a fridge. Actually, in that village, they told me that before the provision of that mini grid, there were 1 fridge in that village. And the person who has that fridge can take like a month or 2 without operating it. But at the time they were explaining to me, they had more than 40 fridges in that village. But the grid now, the capacity, which I think has to do with the design and the sizing of the grids. So I'm concerned about the sustainability. What the framework that the REA is deploying and the development partners in making sure that those infrastructures are going to be sustained, especially if the subsidy is to be withdrawn. We have seen the pattern in the country. The government is withdrawing subsidies in many areas. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we will take the responses to these questions first. And if there's enough time, we'll take more questions. But rest assured, you can easily still engage with any of the panelists after we conclude the session, one-on-one, to get more insights to your questions. So Dr. Abba, please take the first slot. And then I'd like all the panelists to address the question on carbon markets and combine that with your closing statements for the session. Thank you.
So quickly, the first question around on-grid on-grid plan? Very good question. It is an area that is very enticing and very interesting to REA. However, the model why REA's project works is the fact that we ring fence the collection. If you put any project on grid, then you are now at the mercy of the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading PLC, which means that from the beginning you may be getting nothing less than more than 45% of your tariff. And that is why the viability comes the viability question comes into it. We really want to start the grid connected project if the market thing works. Why we continue to see the rest course investing based on our capital grant is because there's a clear line of sight of their revenue. If that is distorted, the entire framework would collapse, and that would not make it viable. In terms of mix, we already have started looking at energy mix. We also last month we were in a village called Balanga in Gombe State. This is an 11,000 hectare of wheat farming fertile land in Gombe State that since the time of IBB, Ibrahim Babangida, he flew when he was promoting, incentivizing the wheat farming, he flew into that community as an area of focus. But from that period, 1980 something, I don't think you were born then. From 1980 something till date, there wasn't any infrastructure to incentivize that wheat farming to cultivate that 11,000 hectares till now. We are working with UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and REA. We are deploying 620 kilowatts of hybrid mini grid, 320 micro hydro and 300 solar system to combine to give opportunity for farming. And this somehow answers the last questions in terms of what we are doing, focusing on the agricultural clusters. Accessible to rural communities, not only focusing on the SMEs. Yes, we are doing that. And you see, so this is different version of experience. The last contributor talked about what he has seen is most of the mini grid are only powering the household who are taking very little electrons. But you, from your own experience, you are seeing that the mini grids are focusing more on the small and medium enterprises, forgetting the household. So these are different experiences, and we have seen in mix. And that is why now what we design is the EHAT project, energizing education, health, agriculture, rural communities, and transportation. What we have seen is we go to community, for example, if there is a health program, we just do study, focus on the health institution, power the institution, and we go. And somebody comes and do education, we go back to the community, do another study, power this and go. Maybe, so this, it's the most inefficient way of electrifying based on scarce resources. And that is why we say, if we are going to community now, we are doing the entire program. We do the studies, we have conducted these studies, 25 mini grids per state in the first phase, and we are thinking of deploying 3,700 mini grids across the country. And we have identified all the communities and provided this data to the state. Not taking advantage of carbon markets, I mentioned it. One of the reasons we have created the Renewable Asset Management Company is to take that advantage of it. And very soon we will come and tell you what we have catalyzed from the carbon market based on the project that meets the requirement. That is the first 15 university projects. Those are the ones that we are targeting. Policy reform on energy efficiency. We are not promulgators of policies, it's the ministry. And I think there's energy efficiency, something policy. I don't think I have read it, but definitely what you identify is a key challenge that even at the universities, we are looking at how do we deploy this mini grid. If you go to University of Abuja, I have 30 megawatts there. The maximum demand the university has taken is 1.8 megawatts. I have 1.2 megawatts. If we are going to enforce energy efficiency, that 1.8 megawatt can come down to 1 megawatt, which means I have access of 2 megawatts. And I want to leverage on independent electricity distribution network to build distribution network and take the 2 megawatt to Immigration Village and sell at commercial price that 2 megawatt. So, but the cost of changing that energy efficiency is the challenge that is there, but it's something that we know, and we know mixing mechanism like insurance. I will leave Kelly to answer that, and Doctor as well. REA support to states in terms of their capacity. My brother Alex and market setup. It's not REA's responsibility to promote the setting up of electricity market at the state level. I think that is the regulators' function. We don't want to take over other people's work, but if you allow us, we will take over it, mind you. But what we are looking at is more in terms of setting the upgrade, mini grid regulation, their Nigeria electrification, electricity strategy and implementation plan as regard to deployment of renewable. Those are the areas that we are focusing on, and that is why we are providing them with the data and having the state-by-state roundtable to make sure that they key into what is already in existence. And part of the things that we did in assessing each state is the capacity development, and we provide them with that feedback of where they are with the capacity development. And also in our own way of building capacity, if you go to NAPTIM now, you will see Nigerian youth, 131 of them, first of its kind, that are undergoing a 1-year training, paid training, which some of the rescuers are the ones that paid for this training. They're going for 3 months, then 9 months internship. That has already started, and this youth that will be first, if you check Twitter, check for next gen, they are doing, you will see the level of work they have started doing. And these are the ones that we want to inject into the system. And next phase to be injected, we are targeting 2,500 next geners that will inject into the market. So that's what we are doing in that regard. In terms of how they would do the rep fund, this is a consultancy. State you come and engage me as a consultancy, we'll give them the utilization pattern of electricity against the segments, the last questionnaire. PUE, we have even a design program that incentivizes race course to deploy PUE. We pay them up to 60% of the cost of the PUE, plus transportation, in-country transportation, as a free, to make sure that those mini grids that you have seen are now, we deploy PUE to optimize the utilization. And those are mini grids that were deployed maybe politically, but now you will see part of the requirement to even give it the grant is we have to see your plan of deployment of PUE as a condition. In terms of sustainability, RAMCO's work is also to be the NDIC, the Nigerian Deposit Insurance, or the Nigerian Insurance of the renewable energy. We have two theories. One theory is that because the project that we are deploying are done by the private sector, and the private sector have either debt or equity in the project, they would not allow the project to not to work. They will continue to maintain it for them to recoup their debt or equity, or even earn some predetermined IRR. So that is the theory. But we, being the risk averse that we are challenging that theory that private sector can still allow that project to not to work and have an abandoned mini grid. We have seen some African countries where there are over 1,000 mini grids deployed and are not working in one African country. So we don't want to repeat of that. So the RAMCO's mandate is also in the taking over a mini grid in the event of the failure of the private sector to resuscitate the mini grid and continue to operate it over a period of time. A lot of thinking are taking place in different areas. I can't share all of them, but really, ARIA is changing the dynamics in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Abaliyu. I apologize, but it seems we have to let him go. He has to be somewhere and they would like to take his leave now. Thank you very much for your participation on the panel. We appreciate you, sir. Okay, so to the question on carbon markets, Dr. Na, Mr. Kelly, I'd like you to provide answers to that question before I take the last question online for you, Dr. Kelly. Sorry, Mr. Kelly.
Okay, so we quite understand that carbon market is still growing and the regulatory framework is still not fully implemented. However, as an institution, we are already positioning ourselves in that regard, and that has given birth to some of the projects we are currently doing. So as a financial institution, we are trying to ensure we cut down on carbon emissions through the usage of generators across our branches. So we're actually solarizing most of our branches across Nigeria. So definitely when the market matures, we'll be able to tap into it. And not just in that regard, also in the e-mobility space, we've gone ahead to develop e-mobility products that are now commercially viable in the market. An example is the Core. Core is an e-mobility product that not just finance EVs, rather we have our own EVs in country, which people are actually purchasing. And we've also built charging stations commercially viable for users of EV to come over and charge their vehicles. So these are some of the ways we are positioning ourselves, pending when the market will be developed so that we can tap from that market. So for the question from Idris, financing MSMEs is a bit tricky, but at the same time, it's rewarding. So why do I say it's rewarding? MSMEs are the economic bedrock of any nation. If you want your nation as a country to develop economically, you need your SMEs to be booming. And in that regard, what we've done is to provide different types of facilities. So we have different tenures for different MSMEs. I know the question will be why. MSMEs are being classified based on the nature of their business. Not all MSMEs are in the same category, right? So based on your business, we provide you a typical kind of facility. And at the same time, we do credit analysis of what your monthly or annual turnover is, if it can repay for the particular solution you are going for. So I don't know if that answers your question, Idris. All right.
Thank you very much. Dr. Na, over to you.
Thank you. Just briefly touching on the carbon markets aspect. So in terms of our project or our program, we've displaced over 2,000 diesel generators through, financing the standalone solar systems. So there has been a huge impact on our end in terms of our, contribution. We do work closely with our developers. So it's Sustainable Energy for All. We also have a program that focuses on carbon markets. That's our African Carbon Markets Initiative. So once we do work with developers, we then link them to our ACME team, and then they also work together with them to try and take advantage of those carbon markets, especially because the impact in terms of displacing the diesel is so, profound. So it's essentially a two-step process where developers get funding from the UEF and then implement the projects and then work with our ACME team to essentially try and recover those carbon markets. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to give our online participants, an advantage, I'd like to take one questions for each of you from the online participants. So Mr. Kelly, there's a question here from John. It says, will Sterling Bank consider lending to a hybrid shipbuilding or dedicated renewable energy venture with said generated RE servicing only the project's power requirements? Do you understand the question?
No, let me.
Okay. Will Sterling Bank consider lending to a hybrid shipbuilding slash dedicated renewable energy venture with said generated RE servicing only the project's power requirements. Then it has a second part that says that, does Sterling Bank make equity investments? If yes, what is Sterling's exit horizon? Just one more.
Okay.
There's also one that says that, will Sterling Bank participate in de-risking early stage emerging energy technology?
So for emerging technology is a bit tricky. So as much as we want to be pace setter in this space, we make use of depositors' funds, right? So emerging technologies have not yet been market proven or commercially viable. We may not be able to invest in such technologies, right? For the second question.
Yes, does Sterling Bank make equity investments?
Yes, we've done that with some organizations in the past. If we see opportunities there, definitely we'll make equity investments. It's subject to credit review and economic viability of the business.
Okay, how about the question on hybrid shipbuilding?
Okay, so top of my head, we are open to anything about financing sustainability. So it's subject to when we look at what you are bringing to the table. If it meets all the requirements, then yes, we are in for it. So we don't throw anything off. As long as it's tailored towards sustainability, we are open for it.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Na, we have a question for you that says that, does SE for All support composite renewable energy projects with a green hydrogen facility as a sole off-taker?
So currently, no. I think it's a very short answer. Currently, we don't support that. At the UEF, we have a range of technologies and projects that we are supporting. So mini grids, our standalone systems. We focus mainly on solar. In Zambia, we have our PUE program. But in terms of carbons and hydrocarbons, we don't do that as yet. Though the universal energy facility is not limited in terms of the type of technologies that it can serve in the future. So it is something that we could look towards too, but at the moment we're basically focusing on solar. But thank you for the question.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you once again to our distinguished panelists and to the audience for your engagement. Thank you also to the organizers of the Power Dialogue. We have come to the end of this session. We've heard today that while the challenges exist, with the right mix of innovative financing, strong policies, decentralized solutions, we can actually scale access to renewable energy in Nigeria. I'd like to just remind us of a few recommendations and highlights of the session. We need to continually de-risk the RE sector through innovative means, where all stakeholders are willing to partake in the risk sharing. We also need to continually bring forward more bankable projects to potential investors. It's important that we design the right financing tools to build investors' confidence through favorable policy and regulatory environment as well. And also, financial institutions need to design more tailored products suited to the nature of RE projects in Nigeria. If we continually make efforts to reduce investment risks and to strengthen policies, as well as leverage climate finance in combination with the right private capital, we can scale renewable energy access in Nigeria. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. With this, we have come to the end of the Power Dialogue for today. I would like to encourage us to please network, don't be in a hurry to leave, talk to someone, meet someone, exchange contacts. And I wish you a very wonderful evening. Thank you.